Okay, so we're going to talk about how to grid and possibly expand your old master drawing. So here is my old master drawing, and I need to know how big it is. And it is 9 inches tall and 8 inches wide. And I need to know how big my paper is, and that's 18 inches wide by 12 inches wide. So 12 inches is really my constraining measure, and I can make 8 inches wide turn into 12 inches wide, and that's as wide as I can make it. And that happens to work out to exactly 1.5. So for every inch grid on my original, I'm going to do 1.5 inch grid squares on this. So here I am marking out my 1.5 inch grid squares. You can see I'm using the ruler. You mark them on either side of the paper. 1.5 inches, 3 inches, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, and then 12 is the edge of the paper. And then I just connect those grid lines. That's actually not what I'm doing. I'm actually measuring in the edge of the width. So 9 times 1.5 is, I believe, 13.5. And so I'm measuring 2.25 inches in from each side of the paper, so that I've got like a frame for where I'm gonna put it. And then on each of those lines, between each of those lines, I'm going to measure my 1.5 inches for the other set of my grid marks. So 1.5 inches, 3 inches, 4.5, 6, 7.5, 9, 10.5, 12, and you can see 13.5 there. And same thing at the top. And 1.5 inches is probably going to work out for most of you guys for your scale. So 1 to 1.5, 1 to 1.5. So you'll be making your squares 1.5 inches on your watercolor paper, and 1 inch squares on your original. I haven't actually made the squares on my original. I'm going to do that here in just a second. But this is me making the grid. Make sure you've got yourself lined up with your top and bottom lines. And you see how I'm using my hand as kind of like a bridge. I'm pushing down with each of my fingers to keep the ruler from moving. And I just sort of shove the lead up on an angle so that it kind of goes as straight down as I can to make a nice even line for my grid. And there's my grid on that. So now I need to grid my original. So that's going to be a 1 inch grid. So that's pretty easy. I'm going to make my 1 inch lines down each side. Do that again on the other side, and then at the top and the bottom, and make that grid. Change my mind here and move from a pencil to a pen. You definitely don't want to use pen on the watercolor paper, but you may need it on the original to be able to see your grid line. So the reason we're doing this assignment here is that it's kind of like research. You're sort of researching how this original artist made this painting, and you're trying to copy that. So it's a bizarre form of research, but that's why we do these copies. It's the way we're learning, is by learning how other people who've been good at it have continued to be good at it. So that's really why we do this, and hopefully we learned something from it. So as you're doing this, you're going to get really familiar with this drawing, this painting, and whatever your painting is, it may not be this one, And you'll start to see, oh, they did that there. Oh, they did that there. And you'll find mistakes in them too. Like, oh, this tree branch doesn't go to the ground. And you'll discover that if your painting is good enough, you can make mistakes. And by the way, this painting is by Lucan Achtschellinck, I believe is how you say that. And he's a Flemish painter, 1626 to 1699. And the original was done in pen and brown, gray ink, and watercolor. So knowing that can help me make my plans for how I'm going to be doing this. And there we have it. We are good. Okay, now we're going to start drawing it out. And the first thing I'm doing here is I'm putting numbers across the bottom and numbers across the bottom. And then I'm going to put letters up the top. Because that's how you keep yourself from getting lost and you start drawing in the wrong grid square. And that can especially be easy with a natural landscape like this. You know, trees can sort of exist in any shape. And if we're trying to copy it, we're going to get confused if we don't put our letters and numbers on there. All right, then you just kind of pick a point. Like this seems like an obvious point to me, so I'm going to start drawing there. And I look for the points where they cross the grid, and then I kind of connect the dots. And that's what I do, and I just keep on doing it. You don't need to go into a huge amount of detail for watercolor, and I realize you can't really see what I'm drawing here, but I want most of the detail to come from the actual paint or even from inking at the end if I decide to do that. You'd really want a sepia pen if you were going to ink at the end. So, you know, I'm just trying to get the big shapes. Like that tree is a really obvious big shape that I need to get. And here we're going to go in super speed and finish drawing it out. And I'm actually a superhero, so this is the literal speed at which I draw. So some of these bigger like landscapey areas, I just kind of block in where they are as opposed to try to capture every detail. And there is my sketch. Not too much detail. That's where I'm going to start painting from. If you've got some lines that are too heavy, now's the time to kind of erase them, like rub your eraser over and pull them back. And here I am taped out. And if you'll notice, I had to go all the way to the very edge, so I'm kind of carefully taped out around the width of the painting. And that is all.